Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Rediscovering History podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you. Thank you for returning back to the podcast, Rediscovering History. I'm your host, Wendy Aris, and today we have as a guest for Season 7, Episode 1, Ms. Olive Senior, who is an internationally renowned author and poet, and her most recent appointment has been as the Jamaican Laurel Poet from 2021 to 2024. And currently today on this episode, we'll be speaking about her latest book, Paradise Once. So thank you so much, Ms. Senior, for coming on to the podcast. And before we start, can I just have you just go into your why as to why you wrote Paradise Once?
Okay, I ended up writing Paradise Once after, I think, a lifetime of curiosity about the people Columbus met when he arrived in the Caribbean in 1492. And in our school books, during the colonial era, when I went to school, and perhaps even now, we were told that Columbus met these primitive little people and they vanished. And I have been intrigued by that idea of how people can suddenly vanish ever since childhood. And I have spent many, many decades of my life researching the Taino to find out what really happened to them. And my book, Paradise Once, my novel, is sort of the end of a long process to bring to the world the true story of the indigenous people who bore the brunt of the encounter by Europe, with Europe in 1492.
Because your book takes place in Cuba,
yes.
Right? And so just, if you can go into who were the Taino and what that, who they represented.
Yes. Okay, so in our English textbooks, they were called Arawaks. Mm-hmm. We know that their language is derived from Arawak. And there's been an enormous amount of research into the indigenous people who settled throughout the Caribbean. We know a lot more now, and it is believed that they all came from the region around the Orinoco region, that is around the countries which are now Ghana, Colombia, Venezuela, that area. Mm-hmm. They were master boatmen with these enormous canoes that were bigger than Columbus's flagship. And they paddled their way north, successive waves of indigenous people, and they settled the islands, starting with maybe around Trinidad. The people who are called Taino, who are the subject of my book, settled the northern Caribbean, the Greater Antilles, so the islands of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, which is Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Cuba, the Bahamas, that part of the Caribbean. And those are the people we call the Taino, although we don't know what they call themselves.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, because there are many names that are referred to them, but still,
yes,
they are the Taino people. And your book really solidified the language of the people. And why did you feel that was necessary to really ensure that they were entrenched within the book?
Yeah, well, in all my writing, ever since I started out as a writer a long time ago, I have realized that people travel with their language. You can't be a human being without hearing your voice, knowing how you speak. So all my short stories, my poetry, I use voice a lot. So when I came to write this book, first of all, I should say, it's set 20 years after the arrival of Columbus. That is roughly 2 generations later. And I try to write it from the point of view of the Taino. And therefore, I felt that to do them justice, I had to use their language as much as possible without too much confusion to the reader. Mm-hmm. So there is a glossary at the back. Taino has come to us through Spanish. It's the words, some of the words are quite familiar to us, but I wanted to use the words as a way of affirming the identity of these people and acknowledging their existence in this way, that they're real people like us. They had a language. They're talking to us over, 500 years.
Yeah, definitely. And shows that connection again to their own identity.
Exactly.
Right? Because the other theme that you wrote about was self-awareness. So self-awareness of oneself, self-awareness of one's community. And again, that was really rooted. Why did you feel that needed to be?
Because I wanted to counter the lies is a strong word, but I wanted to counter the narrative that has been handed down to us. Because the Caribbean was really the earthly paradise. Columbus said so. And if you think of it, these islands had food aplenty. There was no hunger, no shortage of food from the sea or the land. They had no animals that threatened them.
Yeah.
Occasionally they'd have a hurricane and so on. They might have a few raids from the sea by Kalinaga or Caribou or whoever. But on the whole, this was an environment that was perfect. And what it did was, over thousands of years, these people were enabled to create a society that was peaceful, but also well-ordered, based on their mythologies of which told them how to behave, how to act. And children were brought up in this very structured kind of way. And so I wanted to reflect that these were people who had, I'm trying to find the right word. I don't want to use civilized because I find that offensive in that. But it's not. It's not offensive because the Spaniards who arrived had to debate whether they were humans or not. They view the indigenous people as inhuman. They didn't have a written language. They didn't have their religion. Although in my book, I show that the Taino had a religion and a very strong one. So I was trying to, although it's a novel and the story is made up, I wanted to use it also as a teaching tool to say to people, this is what we know about the Taino. I tried to be very true to the research, the knowledge that we do have now from, our scholars.
Exactly. And they were a people. They were not considered to be less than in terms of what is, as you said, what the existing narrative is right now. In terms of saying savages, so to speak.
Exactly.
Right?
Their society exactly mirrored the societies that existed elsewhere.
Yes. Whether or not they wanted to recognize that their society was a reflection of what they had already done, as opposed to imposing anything else on them. Because the other thing as well that your book, really brought out was the past traditions and how that really solidified people to know that they come from somewhere and are passing on this knowledge to the next generation.
Yes.
And how, again, it was then really rooted within the book as well.
Well, the Taino themselves did not, they vanished not vanished, but their culture was destroyed very quickly. They didn't have writing as we know it. So what we know about them is through the Spanish, what the Spaniards wrote, and that's quite extensive, and through what archaeologists are now discovering, archaeologists and other scientists. The only thing that we have directly from them really is their mythology, which was collected by a Spanish priest and which has been reinterpreted. And we know that the mythology represents what they call semis or avatars. We see them, that also represented in their artwork, which was exquisite, their carvings and so on. So because we have an idea of the mythology, we can understand where they're coming from, because everything is based on things. Mythology tells us what happened the first time. And so everything is based on what happened first time. And this is how they structure their lives, around these semis, around practices that continue, are traditional, and have always existed. And so the people in my book act as the Taino did, act according to rules laid down from first time, from mythology.
Mm-hmm. And as well, the spirituality.
Yes.
That too was totally weaved throughout the book and really gave a centeredness to the individuals themselves, because that was what they respected. That was what they honored. And why did you feel, again, that too needed to be told in that fashion?
Yes. Indigenous people do not see a separation between themselves and what we call nature. They're part of nature, unlike us.
Yes.
We've separated ourselves. And also, they were not, the living were not separated from the spirit world. There was this constant interaction with the spirit world, but also with the world of nature, which was part of that spirit world. Again, I tried to capture this in this book, this constant interaction. Some people will look at those events and say they're fantasy, but I'm not writing fantasy. I'm writing what the lived reality of these particular people.
And it was a great visual for myself to kind of imagine, to know what that would look like and to be able to experience that as well, because it really did feel like it was, you were there, you were experiencing it, and you can, oh yes, I can see this, I can see this, I can see this happening.
Yes.
And being able to experience that. Maybe it's because for myself, I did recently go back to Jamaican. I was in, the Blue Mountains, and that's a totally different experience, right? So those are the things that kind of draw you in.
Yeah. The thing is, as I said, I wrote the book from the perspective of the Taino, not from my perspective. Yeah. But that perspective, as I said, was based on many, many years of research. And until I felt I understood, as far as we can, this culture. And then I lived with the characters for a very long time. And so I just allowed them, to set off on their journeys and do what they would do, allow things to happen in a way.
So for you, when you have like a story like that where you've kind of, it has simmered with you for so many years, and now you've birthed it into kind of like a reality, so to speak, I guess you're really, careful as to how it is shown to the world. Is that?
Yes. I wanted to try to be true to these people. They are our ancestors. Yes. We now know something over 60% of the people of certainly the Spanish-speaking islands have Taino blood through the maternal side. Yes. Perhaps in Jamaica it might be a bit less. But there is a resurgence since the Columbus quincentennial of people now feeling free to claim their Taino ancestry. It's even happening in Jamaica, where the history was truncated because it was taken by the British in 1655. And so we were told, there are none of these people left. And unfortunately, in our islands today, in the Caribbean, we still see history beginning with 1492. Yes. Or in our case, 1655, we see history in the British Islands as plantation history. Yes. Enslavement and so on. But I would like the book to enable us to start rethinking our history and include the indigenous component, which has really been ignored and left out. And yet it's part of us. In Jamaica, as you know, our favorite food is bami or cassava bread. If you eat cassava bread, you're partaking in a Taino event. Yeah. Hurricane, a lot of the words we use, hurricane, huracan, canoe, etc. And even I think a lot of their spiritual practices match Christian practices in a way with their saints or Yoruba or African practices. If you look at the similarities in these religions, you will then begin to feel a closeness to these ancestors that we've ignored for so long.
Exactly, because a lot of this whole area of the Caribbean is multi-layered. It's not, as you said, it's not just one thing. Yeah. And then that's the whole definition of the Caribbean. That's not it. No. I know from my research, when you start peeling away the onion, you start seeing there's a lot more to this.
Oh, yes.
A lot more to this than what we've been told. And The other thing that I wanted to reference to is, again, the traditions, because as you mentioned, a lot of the traditions are similar to what we think are like nai, the painting of the body all black for those types of rituals for when someone is to be buried.
Yeah.
What does that, how's that ground, for the book in Paradise Once?
Well, in writing the book and in looking at, say, their practices, cultural, religious, and so on, I was really struck by how, when Jung talks about the collective unconscious, how that functions.
Yeah.
Because we, for instance, growing up, if someone died, everyone dressed in black and children were dressed in white. That's changed now, but I'm just saying that is just a simple indication of how connected we are, because the indigenous people, not just the Taino, would use black body paint to signify mourning,
Yeah.
And they'd use red body paint to signify other things, war and so on. And there are numerous examples. The fact that they had a high god, and then he's represented by these avatars or other figures or semis, each of whom represents an element in nature, for instance, which is similar, as I said, to the Yoruba practice, is similar to the Catholic practice of saints. There are so many ways in which we can look at this and say, we are all humans.
Yes.
We are, we're the same people in a way, because we are human. This is what connects us.
Not only is that this is what connects us, but what what is something innate within us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we need to have some sort of, guiding force, something that we can look at as some sort of hope, some sort of belief system that guides us naturally.
Yes.
Whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely. I think this is it. But also I think we need it more than ever now.
Yes.
And the point is that perhaps we need to turn back to indigenous practices. Their stewardship of the environment is what we need now. We need, there are so many lessons we can learn from our forefathers that we ignored for so long. And I just want to say that the connection, one of the things I wanted to do with the book is make the connection between the indigenous people and Africans both of whom formed the Maroon communities.
Yes, right.
Which still exists today. And there's that very strong connection with indigenous and African practices. And also that engagement with the environment, which as protectors of the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, you wrote, I love the characters' names, because it reflected the environment that they were in. And why did you feel that was needed to put that as well in the book?
Well, that comes naturally too, because the characters, and with all my writing, whether with this or contemporary, my characters arrive with their names. That's part of thinking about them. And in indigenous culture, the name is given to the child, or the child chooses a name later on in life. You acquire many names, but they usually reflect either elements in nature or an event which signifies, what you're going to be or do. And so the names just came naturally to me.
Yes.
When the characters began to form in my mind, and I got to the point where I knew them very well. They just arrived with their names. But at the same time, the names are not arbitrary.
Yes.
They arrived with names that they would have had in that culture.
Yes, absolutely. It didn't appear that it was outside of. It just blended in, and it was just really interesting to see it.
Yes.
And then to go, exactly.
Yes, they're it's very funny, because one of the characters in there is called Burning Spear, who is, of course, a major Jamaican reggae artist. And that name just came to me. It wasn't intended to reflect contemporary Burning Spear. The man makes the finest spear points in the world. But at the same time, I sort of liked that idea where my unconscious was making a connection with Burning Spear in my book is an artist of, he makes the best spear points in his culture. That is high art. Yeah. And of course, Burning Spear in our culture, I regard as a very fine artist too.
Yes.
So I think there are ways in which my unconscious as the writer sort of throws up, these elements, or even with there's an African in the book. And he just arrived. There are characters who arrived.
Yes.
And I said, who are you? I have to find out. But there's a scene in the book that I really love. And when I wrote it, I didn't think about what I was doing. But this African, Saku, is in a hut up in the mountains. They're escaping. And he's there with two Taino. And he has a book with him. He's introducing them to a book which has it's the tales of Marco Polo, who's talking about the East.
Yeah.
Saku is from Spain, but his ancestry is Wolof from Africa. And then there are the two Taino. So he's reading a book which is very Western way of telling us a history. His grandfather was a griot of his African village, or his great-grandfather. And the Taino have their own way of recording history, which is Arieto. And I was thinking, here we are on a mountaintop in Cuba, in a hut, in the Caribbean, and these worlds are all coming together.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that struck me in writing this book, how the Caribbean has always been and continues to be the space which accommodates the world.
Yes. Absolutely. It definitely does. And all the different worlds tend to they do coexist. They definitely coexist. And so I know that you mentioned a lot of the research that you've done for the book. What were some of the repositories that you used to be able to find a lot of this information?
Just libraries and so on, because the research is fairly recent. I mean, there are books earlier than the quincentennial, but that sort of triggered a real interest on the part of scholars, particularly in the Spanish-speaking islands. So a lot of the early research was from the Spanish-speaking islands. So there's an enormous amount of books. There's endless stuff on like academia now, which is how I keep in touch with all the latest information. Yes. So I just read everything that I could lay my hands on that has been written. And of course, I also read all the Spanish chronicles, starting with Columbus's diaries, Las Casas, who influenced this book. There's an enormous amount of material there. Yeah. Unfortunately, as I say, we don't hear much from the Taino themselves. But I sort of really tried to read just about anything that has been written on the subject.
Perfect. No, thank you. And of course, looking back on your career, how has it, I guess, your understanding of both Jamaican, of course, Caribbean history, how has that really helped or assisted or kind of changed your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I always say I was brought up in rural Jamaica, so I was a very curious child. So I was shaped by both the oral history and by the written history, of course. But, I know a lot about our what people call folklore, which is the lived reality of the people around me. But it was really as I got older and Jamaican independence neared, and that set off again a lot of research by people into our traditional culture, which had been ignored because up to then we were told the only culture that mattered was European, was British. Yeah. And so I was privileged to come of age at a time when I could be influenced by these people doing all the research. And I have continued in that tradition. I then realized that there is so much to be explored in order to understand my culture. Because in doing so, I also was trying to understand myself.
Yes.
And I think that has shaped my writing from the very start. My writing has always been grounded in the place I come from, in the villages, the village I come from, in the wider world. And of course, as I grew up, I came to develop an interest in the wider Caribbean. And I've been privileged to travel to most of the countries in the Caribbean, meet people, and so on. So my life has been really enriched by my discovery. I'm like Columbus, I'm out there discovering. And I'm privileged really to be able to write about it,
Absolutely. Because, you do go on a journey that you're not expecting.
Yes.
And you just don't know where it's going to lead you to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
It's just one of those things. So.
That's how I live life. But, I've enjoyed it. It's it's been very exciting.
Yes. And, as we come to a close with this episode, what advice would you give to either young Caribbean people or anyone in terms of their writing and their discovery of where they live?
Well, I have to say that if you want to be a writer or a creative artist of any kind, you have to be curious. To me, curiosity is what has shaped my life. You have to open your eyes to the world.
Yes.
It can't be just about you moaning and groaning, oh, my lost love, or, I hate this. In other words, as young writers, we all start off spilling our emotions. Yeah. That's where we start. But I would say, look, you need to transcend that, get beyond that, and look at society and learn as much as you can. Ask questions, be curious. Because the more you learn, the more you can feed your creativity. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would say that's the most important thing. And then learn your craft, whatever your craft is. Learn to be skillful, accept teaching, accept teachers. You in turn will become a teacher if you learn the craft properly.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you. That's great advice. Because, right, if you are continually learning, it's like you're still, as you said, the adventure, and you're still still seeking, still knowing, and still trying to find, okay, what is that? What is that?
Exactly.
Type of thing. So thank you so much for coming on, your time, for discussing your book, Paradise Once, and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes so people can be able to access it, purchase it, and know where it's at. But no, thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. And thanks for asking questions that are so stimulating.
You're welcome. Thank you. Hoped you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you.